Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back. Video game adaptations have always been a minefield when it comes to film or TV. And no matter what the source material is, it can be an indie cult hit, a genre defining blockbuster, or something with decades of lore behind it. Bringing it to the screen is kind of a no win scenario. See, gamers are some of the most passionate, vocal fan bases in all of pop culture. But they're also some of the most insufferable. And it's because they've invested dozens, sometimes hundreds of hours into these worlds. I mean, they know the dialogue, they know the lore, the feel of the game. And when something gets adapted, they want that feeling back. But here's the problem. That feeling isn't about the plot points or Easter eggs. It's about the immersion of it. It's about the control. And the reason a moment hits so hard in a game is because you were the one who pulled the trigger or made the choice or failed the mission. And it's impossible to recreate that in a passive medium like film or TV. So the question becomes, do you stick to the story exactly and risk it feeling stale, or do you change it and risk backlash from the gamer community because they've betrayed the source material? And see, that's where all these adaptations fall apart. They miss the point of what made the game matter to begin with. Either they copy it beat for beat, which, if they're not careful, it can flatten the whole experience into this lifeless thing, or they gut it entirely in the name of reinvention, and then the fan base turns on them before the credits even roll. But maybe the real issue isn't the writers or the studios. Maybe it's the audience. And I don't critique the audience very often, mainly because Hollywood is loaded with terrible writers. But for all the talk about wanting faithful adaptations, what people really want when it comes to video games is this impossible hybrid, something that is both new and familiar, and it expands on the world, but it still feels like home. They want something that validates the thing they loved about the game while still getting something different. And I don't think there's a single adaptation that can pull that off. And if there are any, I haven't seen them. And these adaptations usually fail because they tried to please everyone, but they failed and they pleased no one. So let's talk about that for a minute. We're going to talk about 3 different adaptations: what works, what doesn't, and what everyone keeps getting wrong when it comes to turning these games into stories for the screen. Now, I'm going to start off with Fallout on Amazon Prime because it is the rare example of a video game adaptation that it didn't just work. I mean, it nailed the assignment. And the reason is pretty simple, because it didn't try to retell the plot of any specific game. Instead, it dropped us into this brand new story that it's set in this same nuclear blasted sandbox that fans already loved and cared about. And that's what made it feel so good. Fallout as a game series has never been about following a rigid narrative. It's an RPG, so you have freedom, you have absurdity, you have moral choices. You're wandering into this vault and you find something that's weird and maybe horrifying. And then you wonder, what kind of world can produce this? And the showrunners understood that. They didn't just try to honor the lore by chain linking itself to a specific protagonist or a quest line. It understood the world, and that's what made it work. Because think about it, the Fallout universe is ridiculous. It's violent, it's satirical, and it's weirdly charming all in the same breath. And the show leaned into that. It didn't flinch when things got a little grotesque, and it didn't try to sand off any of the more campy edges, right? It embraced the setting's contradictions and it just let them breathe. The Brotherhood of Steel walking out of the wasteland like knights in power armor? Yeah, that was perfect. A ghoul with a revolver and a mysterious past? Even better. Fallout works because it doesn't ask you to have played the game before. It just drops you into the madness and lets the story carry itself. It's great storytelling. There's no hand-holding, there's no lore dumps, and there's no fans will get this winks. It's just a damn good story in a world that made sense. And ironically, not trying to follow the games is what captured the spirit of the games, since they're sandboxes. You can do whatever the hell you want. And it just nailed it. It was perfect. It was more perfect than any adaptation in recent memory. And then let's look at one of my favorite series, Uncharted. This one had all the potential in the world, and it still managed to be a pile of crap. You'd think, a franchise built around pulpy treasure hunts and ancient puzzles and a sarcastic rogue with a shady past would be impossible to screw up. All they had to do was hand it to someone who actually understood the tone. Instead, we got a highlight reel of all 4 games that was Frankensteined into a single generic action movie with none of the weight that made the game special. And the casting. Look, Tom Holland might be an okay Spider-Man, but he's not Nathan Drake. He's not even close. He's too young, he's too clean-cut, and he's too much of a safe bet for studios. I'm sick and tired of seeing him and his ugly girlfriend cast in everything. But in this case, it's not just miscast. It's a complete misunderstanding of what made Nathan Drake work in the first place. For one, he's a little older. He's a little more worn down. And he's not clean. And if you look at Sully, played by Mark Wahlberg, they got the memo that just said, cast someone famous, instead of cast someone right. That was not Sully. I mean, hell, they couldn't even give him a mustache or a cigar. And here's the real problem. Uncharted, the movie, wasn't a story. It was just a product that was built to sell tickets. It relied on recognizable actors and cherry-picked set pieces from the games with none of the connective tissue that gave those scenes their punch. You know what I mean? You can't just rip the cargo plane stunt from Uncharted 3 and expect it to matter when it's surrounded by these cardboard actors in a script that it seemed like it was written by a focus group. And there was no real narrative weight. There's no deeper mystery or any kind of sense of consequences, especially for people who've played the 4th game. Did they really kill Sam? I hope not. Who knows? They screwed it up anyway. But the only option left for such a terrible story was to overcompensate with name recognition. And that's why they went for Tom Holland. And that's why they shoehorned in a Nolan North cameo like it was going to earn them fanboy points. It was just surface. There's no substance. And it was a hollow imitation of Uncharted as a series. If the story had been stronger, if they'd actually written a real Uncharted adventure, they wouldn't have needed an A-list actor to carry it. The world, the tone, the characters could have done all of the heavy lifting. But the plot was so empty, they had to lean on those names. And that's what happens when it stops being an adaptation and it's just another unforgettable blockbuster. And that's what Uncharted was. It was forgettable. It was a checklist of these cool ideas that stripped the heart that made people give a crap about it in the first place. And now, I'm probably going to make some of you mad, so I'm going to warn you here. We're going to talk about The Last of Us. Now, this one, it's a slam dunk, but not to a lot of people. And it ended up dividing its fan base like a fire axe driven through drywall. Now, let's start with the obvious here. One, The Last of Us stuck very close to the games, almost scene for scene. Now, in the first season, they completely glazed over the whole meeting Dave and, getting the truck so they could get to Pittsburgh and where they had to deal with the hunters. But that was probably done for time. They didn't reinvent the wheel here, and they didn't wander off into creative liberties. They stuck as close as they could, and they respected the source material, and they followed it with precision. And for years, that's what people kept saying they wanted. Just follow the game. Don't change it. Stick to what made it great. Well, that's what they did. And now everyone's mad about it. Because here is the truth. Fans don't actually want an exact adaptation. They want the version that lives in their heads, this idealized version. They want the same feeling that the game gave them. They want to be surprised, but only in ways they approve of. And they want to feel safe in a world they love, and they also want it to challenge them, which is basically to say they want the impossible. Now, casting Bella Ramsey as Ellie only made the tension worse. And it's not just that she didn't look like Ellie from the game. It's people who played The Last of Us, they bonded with Ellie over all of those hours they put in gameplay. They weren't watching her. They were Joel. They were protecting her. They were with her. They were escorting her across this wasteland. So when Bella showed up with a different voice, a different vibe, and her oddly shaped face, it was more than jarring. But that's because Ellie belonged to the players, and suddenly someone else was wearing her skin, walking around being dumpy and confrontational. And I'm with all of the fans on that. She was a terrible choice. And then season 2 dropped, and we have Joel. And the problem with Joel is that the fans can't let go. No matter how faithful the show is to the story, people are still furious that Joel dies in the second game. And by extension, he died in the show in the second season. If you haven't seen this, I'm sorry, I didn't give you a spoiler warning. But he was never going to last that long if they stuck to the source material. Never mind that it was always part of the narrative, and never mind that his death is literally the entire point of the plot of the second game. It doesn't matter, because people didn't like it. Now they want the show to change the game's story just to protect a character that they weren't ready to lose yet. But that's exactly what they wanted with all of these other adaptations. Joel's death mattered to them in the second game. It hurt. It upended the story because that's what it was supposed to do. And that's what makes it work. That's what makes it powerful. And now the show is faithfully adapting that arc, and a huge chunk of the fan base is furious. Not because the show's doing it wrong, but because somewhere deep inside, they still remember what it felt like when they watched him get beat to death with a golf club by that muscly chick. They don't want to feel it again. And in this case, they want whatever fan fiction narrative they dreamed up in their own heads. And see, that's what makes The Last of Us the most fascinating case study in video game adaptations. It's incredibly well made. It's emotionally interactive and devastating in all the right ways. And still people are mad. Because as it turns out, creating these adaptations isn't just about fidelity, it's about expectation. And when a fan's expectations clash with the reality of the story, it doesn't matter how good it is. They're still going to find a reason to hate it. See, The Last of Us didn't fail in the storytelling. It reminded us that even in some cases where even if the studio gets it 99% right, some people are still going to find things to complain about. The Last of Us is caught in the very trap it worked so hard to avoid. It told the story the way it was meant to be told, and for some people, that was just one step too far. The problem with video game adaptations is it's not about the source material, and it's not even really about the execution half the time. It's that fan bases are impossible to please, and the studios can't get a real feel on who they're actually making these shows or films for. If they try to retell the game exactly, people say they're lazy or uninspired. And if you turn around and try something new, they scream that it's disrespectful. There's just no winning. But Fallout did show us something. It showed us that if you understand the soul of a franchise, the tone, the rules, the world, you don't need to rehash the plot. You can build something new, and it still feels like it belongs in that universe. And that's how you expand. Meanwhile, Uncharted missed every single mark that it could. And that's basically because it was built like a checklist of the greatest hits of the games without really understanding what made any of them great. The Last of Us got everything right, except for the casting of Bella Ramsey. I'm never going to forgive them for that. They might as well have cast Sloth from the Goonies. Anyway, but they still got burned at the stake because some people don't want to relive the parts of the story that hurt, or the game narratives and the way those stories went that they didn't like. They wanted the nostalgia. They wanted the control. They wanted to play the game again and have it be different. But these stories don't work like that. And that's the thing that none of these hardcore fans want to admit. Good stories do not owe you comfort. They don't exist to be tailored to your preferences like a character skin in a loadout menu. Now, I have a lot of beef with a lot of movies and shows out there that even when they're trying to create original material, the storytelling it's just pathetic, and it's agenda-driven by some Harry Potter look-alike chick with a septum ring. But the video game adaptations are never going to make everyone happy. Now, I've said my piece. If you're a fan of the game adaptations, or if you've got some thoughts on any of the shows that I mentioned, Uncharted, Fallout, The Last of Us, I want to hear them. Talk to me. Yell at me. Your opinion's probably not as good as mine, but it is what it is. Only if it's different than mine. If it's the same as mine, then we can be best friends, and I'll invite you to the barbecue. Drop a comment, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the next one.